works out well. Okay, good. Sorry about that. Let me go back to my screen. Some messages in the chat. Okay, all right, so let me go back here, right? So every time I record a session, I upload it on YouTube, right? And then I will post the link by an announcement, but it'll be historically stored here, okay? So you don't have to always go to the announcements. You can go to this information online session recordings, and you'll find all the links here. And it will give you a brief description of what it covered, all right? And then so you would have been experimenting through all the other resources, through the different learning methods. And I hope you are. Please do so. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to help you. All right, so I'm going to go back to the chat. Okay, so today, before I continue and I start the next learning unit, are there any questions? Anything you want some information on before I start? You're all good to go. And I'm going to start learning unit 2 now. Okay. Maybe I'll when I finish this learning unit, then you can feel free to ask any questions. All right, so let's begin. I'm going to start learning unit 2, and that is index numbers. All right, so some of you who have done economics, let's make sure what it's for. Yeah. All right. Some of you have done economics. You may have come across an index, a very common one. Even if you'll see it on the news, it's published now and then. I think once a year. It's called the CPI. Okay, that's an index, Consumer Price Index. And generally, what you need to take away from that is, if it's over 100, that means it's inflated. Okay, so if you see 105, it's inflated by 5%. If it's less than 100, then it means it's decreased. So if it's like 90, if it's 91, then it has decreased by 9%. Okay. You may have also come across something called GDP, which is gross domestic product. Okay, kind of an indicator of how the manufacturing sentiment is measured in our country, and it's a worldwide index. Just checking if anyone's in the lobby. All right. Let me come back to screen. Please, I think you are also allowed to admit students. I hope you are, but if you see anyone in the lobby, just click admit, okay? It'll really help me out instead of going back and forth. So yeah, so that's what the index is used. It's used to gauge whether something inflated, okay, increased or decreased. But what do you mean by increase or decrease? In order for something to be increased, it has to increase from something. You have to compare it to something, right? And that's what we call a base period. We always compare it to some period in the past, right? And that base period it's never a fixed period. We can always change it. But for your purposes in this course, they will always tell you what the base year is. So enough about me talking about that. Let's just look at it through an example, right, to put things in perspective. Excuse me. So on the table on the left side, what you have on top is you have a bunch of toiletry items, and it's just 3 items: soap, deodorant, toothpaste. Now, the information you would be given regarding a basket of items is the price and the quantity. And you would be given those quantities over 2 years, because that's what you're going to compare to. So if I just going to draw your attention to here, this is what you would be given. Mark this in green. You will not be given the entire table. You'll just be given this information here. But I'm going to highlight here. This is all the information you get, right? You'll be given the price in the base year, and that's what the P stands for, P's price. The 0 just means it's the base year. That's why you'll see here, the P1, okay? It's still price, but the 1 means it's in the current year, okay? And your quantity is Q, and the 0 is base year. So that's your price, There's your price column, there's your quantity column in the base here. And it's telling you the price for soap was 195 in 2010, the base year. And in 2018, the price is 210 cents. Okay, and the quantity of soap is 37 in the base year, and in the current year it's 1. So before I go on, everyone understands the information in this table so far, just by the green columns. Ignore everything else, the calculated columns, etc. Just whatever highlights the green. Does everyone understand what this table is telling you in terms of the quantities, the price, and description of the items? Let's come back to the chat before I move on. Is anyone all good? Questions? All right, let's go back to the table. All right, now let's start calculating indices. Now, what you need to know for this course is there's 3 types of indices we're gonna have. So I'll write it here. Blue. You get a simple index. And as the name says, it's actually quite simple to calculate. And you can work this out for both price and quantity, which we'll do. Then you get the composite index. Explain the difference between the two. Okay. Simple index means you just look at one item on its own. So for instance, I could just look at soap on its own, the soap on its own. I could look at toothpaste on its own, etc. Composite means you look at the basket, you look at the total. Okay, all together. That's what composite means. Look at it as a total. Now, for the composite index, there is unweighted. And this is a bit easier to calculate. And then you get the weighted. And this is a bit more complex. We'll use some formulas here to do it, but so it's not too bad. All right, so that's pretty much what we're going to cover. One, simple, and we're going to do the unweighted composite, and then we're going to do the weighted. These are the 3 things we'll cover. So let's start. We'll start one with the simple index, and I'll show you by examples. Okay. So let's work out a simple index for price. For soap, but we'll do it for price. Okay, so now we're going to do it for price. So what you do to get the price index is you want to compare the price from one period, the price to another period, and you always look at the current period over the base. The base period is in the bottom. So we create a fraction, right? The base period is in the bottom, and because we're talking about price, well, what is the price for soap in the base period? So I guess I'm asking, what is P naught for soap, right? And if you look at our table, it's 195, okay? 195, that's the price of soap in the base period. So the fraction P naught is 195. Now, in the numerator, we're looking at the price in current period, because we want to know how price has changed, current period to the base period. And that price, the P1 for soap, is 210 cents. And what we want is we want to express this as a percentage. So we'll multiply this by 100%. Right? And we want to write that as a percent. Now, if you work that out, you'll get a value of 107.69%. So just as I use the CPI as an example, how many of you think the price has inflated and how many think it has deflated? Just put your comment in the chat based on this answer here. So guess what we're asking, has the price increased or has it decreased? Anyone? Very good. Great. And your indicator is that exactly, it's more than 100. Okay, now for a lot of you, you'd be able to do this calculation in your head. Remember I said if something is 105, that means it increased by 5%. Now this is 107.69. So we trying to be accurate to the second decimal place. So we want to show what the increase is to 2 decimal places. So I just make it a habit for myself is whatever the answer is that I get, in our case 107.69, I take the 107.69% and I subtract 100%. And that leaves me with 7.69. That tells me how much it increased. Now when you get the answer, don't just stop there. You need to interpret. If you interpret, you get an extra mark or two. So please remember to interpret your answer. So remember, we were looking at SOAP only, and we were looking at the price and comparing it to the base year, to autonomy. So how we concluded is we would say, look at the years. We get 2018 to the base year, which is 2010. So we would say the price of SOAP, right? That's yes. Oh, sorry. Right, from 2018, I'm going to put short form. Sorry, my bad. 2010 to 2018. It's this 2010, 2018 increased by, and this is your answer, by that. That's how much it increased by, 7.69%. That's how you conclude it. All right, so now we did the simple index and we did it for price, but you can also be asked to do the simple index for quantity. Right? Another way of saying this is the price relative, but that just means a simple price index. So it's the same thing. Anyway, all right, let me erase this. And we'll do the same thing, but we'll do it for quantity. Yeah. Okay, let's do it for quantity. Okay, now we're doing the quantity relative with the simple index for quantity for soap. I'm just going to write QTY, so that's see. Now, just like before, instead of P1 over P0, it's going to be Q1 because we're looking at quantity over Q0 and we multiply this by 100%. So if you look at our table, the quantity for soap in the current year, Q1, is 40. Right? And the quantity for soap in 2010 in the base year, it's 37. Okay, you multiply that by 100%. What do you get? You put the answer in the chat. I told you bring your calculator. I'm going to work this out. You get 1. Let's see how many wrote your calculator. Oh, okay, I'll take a question now. Questions? I see a hand up. Please ask away. Thanks, Daniel. Your hand is up. Do you have a question? So let's go back to the board. You'd have 108.1%. Let me work that out. 8.1. All right. And then the increase is 8.1%, right? Because it's 100 minus that. So how you conclude this is you would say the quantity of soap from 2010 to 2018 increased by 8.1%. Right. Everyone understand that? Any questions before I move on? Oh, okay. No worries. Okay, so all good. All right, we're going to move on to composite. Now, remember I told you I always subtract 100, right? And to get the increase or decrease. The reason why I say that is because sometimes you won't be given such pretty answers or pretty numbers, should I say. Sometimes, say for instance, if you had worked out your index Q1 of Q0, you got something like this. If you got something like 87.24%. Okay, that's what you got. Now you can see that this is less than 100, so it decreased. But for me, it's not obvious what that difference is. Like, I can't work it out in my head to say what that exact difference is from 100. So that's why I just make it a habit to subtract 100. 87.24 to 4% minus 100%. And then you work that out in your calculator, and that will be your decrease. I think it's about 12.76. Okay. So when the value is less than 100, right, and especially when you've got decimals, use your calculator to work it out. Okay, so you would say whatever the number is, you'll subtract 100, and then that's the amount that it decreased by. Right. So it's just a handy tip. It also, instead of you having to work it out in your head, less chance of making a mistake that way. And if you just have the system in place where you're always subtracting 100, you're going to work through it faster. And remember, when you're doing the exam, speed is very important. Okay, so you got to try and work through the problems as fast as you can. Okay. Any questions before I move on? All good. Let's go back to the board. Okay. So we've done simple indices. Now we're going to do composite indices. Okay, we're going to do the easy one first, which is the unweighted composite index. Okay, so now we're going to do composite and say the question is, what is the composite index for toiletry? What is the composite price index? So the question is, what is the composite price index for toiletry items? Okay, that's what you're going to work on. So the key thing is price and composite. Okay. Now, remember what I said, the simple indices are when you're looking at individual items. But now you're looking at it all together, right? All the items together. And the total price is what you're going to look at. So here's the total price in the base year, and here's the total price in the current year. So for this, you need the total price. This P1 is the total in the current year, and P0 is the total in the base year. And you multiply that by 100%. Okay, and if you work that out, so that'll be 24.79 in the numerator. And the denominator is the total in the base year, which is 22.89. And you multiply that by 100%. And if you do that, you get a value of 108.3%. And you're not done there. You need to interpret it. So it's more than 100, so it's increased, and it's increased by 8.3%. So you would say in your final conclusion that the price of toiletry items increased. I'm just going to put an up arrow for increase by 8.3% from 2010 to 2018. So there's a couple of things you must have in your interpretation. You've got to specify what are you talking about. Are you talking about price or quantity? What is the item you're talking about? In our case, it's all toiletry items. Did it increase or decrease? By how much? And what period did it change from? You've got to specify all of these things in your interpretation. Okay, so make sure when you interpret your answers for index numbers, you have ticked off everything that I've mentioned here. All right. Does that make sense? Did I lose anyone? Next question. Just to make sure, you say that the quantity of soap. Yes, Jakob. But the question before that, yes. So before we were talking about quantity of soap. So you would say the quantity of soap from 2010 to 2018 increased by 8.1%. Does that make sense? All right. So we've done composite indices, the unweighted approach. Okay, now we're going to do the weighted indices. All right. Now I'm just going to clear this out and move on to weighted indices. Okay, so this is the third item, the last item that I discussed in the beginning that we're going to cover. And it's just a little bit more complicated, and it's about using the formula. Okay. Now, what a weighted index means is, yes, we want to check whether price or quantity increase depending on the question. But the thing is, if we're gonna, for instance, check how the price increased, then we need to keep the quantity constant. So we do take both of them into the calculation, but we keep the one that we're not interested in constant. So what I'm saying is, if we wanted the weighted price index, and what we do is we vary price and we keep the quantity constant. That's what we're saying. We do use both of them in the calculation, but we vary this, but we keep quantity constant. And in the same way, if we wanted the weighted quantity index, then what we do is we vary quantity, but we keep the price constant. Whatever index we're interested in, that's what we vary, but we keep the other measure constant. I think I've got something in the chat. No. All right. Well, let's get back to here. All right. So let's do one at a time. Let's look at the weighted price index. Okay, so we'll do quantity last. We'll ignore this here. Right, and maybe all of this, of the words is just a bit too much, but I think when you do the calculation, you realize it's not too bad. Okay. So the question is, calculate the weighted Las-Perez price index. Now, the reason why I say Las-Perez is because you will only do two methods for weighted indices. You will either do the Las-Perez or the Parsh, and it will depend on what the question asks for. Okay, so if we ask you to do a weighted price index, we would specify use the Las-Perez method or use the Parsh method. Okay, so let's say the first question asks for the Las-Perez price index. So this first one, we're going to do it this way. This one first. Okay. Fortunately, you're given the formula for this, and that's this formula here. We're going to use this formula, and I'm going to show you how to use it. Okay. That's the formula we're going to use. All right. Now, I'm going to take you through some mathematics just so you understand what that formula is telling you. Okay. When we say A, B, right, what we're saying is A times B. Okay. All right. Now, okay. All right. So here, that's what we're saying. Okay. So the reason why I say that is because if you look at this formula, right, on the top, let's just look at the numerator. You got this sum E1 Q0. That's what you got, right? Now, if you just ignore the summation, just forget about this for a second, you got this P1 Q0. So what you're saying is P1 times Q0. Okay, that's why I use this analogy here. So that's what the notation on the numerator is telling you. It's telling you multiply P1 by Q0. All right. Now, when you have a summation, right? So let's say I will say A1 is 2, A2 is 3, A4. Sorry, back. 3 is 5. These are the values. And if you have something like the sum over all the A's, so your I run from 1 to 3 of all your A's, what you're saying is sum up all these A's. So you're saying 2 plus 3 is 5, and that gives you 10. Everyone understand that? That's what the summation sign means. It means sum up everything in front of that. Did I lose anyone? Okay. One method would be comparing current and previous prices and previous quantities. Yes, Daniel, that's right. Yeah. Okay, let me go back here. All right, so what, not many questions so far. So what this formula is telling you, let's just look at the numerator. The numerator has this here, sum Q1, Q0. What it's telling you to do is, it's telling you to sum over all the items. So there's only 3 items. Do it for soap, do it for deodorant, do it for toothpaste. So it's telling you to multiply the price P1 for soap, okay, times Q0, right? Then I'll put here this, do it for soap. Then do the same thing, P1 times Q0 for deodorant. And then lastly, do the same thing for P1 times Q0 for toothpaste. Right? And then in the end, once you've done that, add it all up. And that's what this answer must be. Okay, you multiply the price P1. So in other words, for soap, it's 2.10 times its quantity Q0, which is 37. You get a value. Then you do the same for deodorant. P1 times Q0, and you do it for toothpaste, and then you add it up. Okay, so if you look at this column here that I've worked out there, this P1 Q0 means multiply this P1, and if you look at the second value in the formula, it's Q0, so you multiply these two columns. So 2.10 times 195 gives you 77.70 cents. You do the same thing for deodorant. So this price and that quantity gives you 382, and you do the exact same thing for toothpaste. Get that? And then lastly, once you've got all of these values, that's what each of them is. This is the 77.7. This is the 382.8, and this is the 94.36. And if you add up all of these values, you'll get this here. That total. So this numerator is 554.86. Does that make sense, everyone? Did I lose anyone? Anyone want me to repeat that or explain it in a different way? You've got to tell me what if you're not understanding or if you're struggling with something. Otherwise, I'm just going to assume that you're following. Can you give me some feedback? Yeah. All good? Thanks, Daniel. Anyone want me to repeat that? Any questions? Okay, let me who is you on this, right? So I've done the numerator. Okay, so let's go back to this is the good way to check if you're understanding it. So if you look at the numerator for the last period in this, so this is the formula we worked out, okay? But sum 1 Q naught over sum E naught Q naught. But the numerator we worked out was this here. Okay, 554.86. Looking at the table, and these columns are what I've calculated, right? Which of them is the denominator? Look at what we're asking for the denominator. Can you put it in the chat? What do you think is the denominator? Give 10 seconds, and then I'm gonna check the chat. The table has done all the workings. You just need to figure out which is the denominator. 511, 81. Yes, Yahoo, I think you just had a typo, but I think you meant the same one. I'm assuming you meant that. Everyone can see that, right? 511.81. That's it. So you've actually worked out the numerator and denominator if you look at how this table is structured. And then you multiply by 100%. Okay, all I'm doing is I'm following this formula to the T. All right? And if you do that, we get a value of now 108.41%. 108.41%. That's the index, the last period price index. Good. No worries, no worries. Almost everyone's understanding, that's the main thing. All right, now I'm going to interpret this. Okay, the interpretation is a bit different. Okay, so I want you to just focus on, I'll write it out. I'll write it in text, I'll type it out, so it's actually better. So just like if you look at what the last price index is, okay, what it does is it varies the price, but it keeps the quantity constant. But which quantity do we keep constant? Now, if you look at the formula actually tells you that. If you look at the numerator and the denominator, and you're looking at what quantity is constant, you'll see the numerator has Q naught, there's Q naught in the numerator, and there's Q naught in the denominator. So that means we've kept the quantity in the base period. How do I know it's a base period? Because it's a 0. The 0 represents the base period. So you've kept the quantity in the base period constant. All right. So how you would start your interpretation is you would just say what you're keeping constant first. So you would say keeping the quantity in the base, instead of saying the base period, say what the base period is. In our case, the base period is 2010. Do it 2010 constant. All right. Okay. Now that you've figured out what you're keeping constant, then you'll talk about what the price has changed by. And the price has changed by 8.41%. Price has the price of toiletry items has increased by 8.41%. I'm gonna move that so you get some space here. Right, and from what period? From 2010 to, this is what you would conclude. Okay, you write it like that. You got to say what you're keeping constant, and then you got to say what items you're talking about, and toiletry items. Has it increased? Yes. By how much? 8.41%. Right? And from what period? Does everyone understand that interpretation? Good. Okay. Let me go back here. All right. This is the last price index. Now you can also be asked for the Parsh price index. And that just means using a different formula, which is also given to you. So what you would do is look at the formula for the Parsh price index, which is given to you. I'll write it out now. And it's in your formula sheet, okay? So you don't need to memorize any of this. Okay, so the formula for the Parsh price index is sum P1 Q1 all over sum E naught Q1 times 100%. Now looking at the table, where you've got the products of all the prices and quantity combinations, okay, what is the numerator? You put that in the chat. Looking at the table, what is the sum of P1 Q1? I'm asking what is the numerator? Can everyone see why it's 478.94? 478.94. Because here's your P1 Q1. There it is. There it is. The numerator is P1 Q1. All right. And the sum of all of that is the total. It's 478.94. Right? And then the denominator is your P naught Q1. So there's that. And the total for that is 442.34. And you multiply that by 100%, and you get a value of 108.27%. So it's increased by 8.2%, 8.27%. And we would do a conclusion similar to before, but I'll write it out. But before I do the interpretation, does everyone understand how to calculate this, how to use that formula? Anyone not sure? Please tell me if you're not sure. I'd rather go back and explain this. More than happy to do that. Just gathering that everyone's okay with this. All right. So now let's look at the formula before we interpret this, okay? Here we're working out the price index, but we have to keep the quantity constant. If you look at the formula, the quantity that's the same in both, it's Q1. Q1, the one is our current year. So what that means is we're keeping the quantity in 2018 constant. So that's how we would interpret it. We would say keeping the quantity in 2018 for the current year, right? The price of royalty items increased by 8.27% from 2010 to does everyone get that? So you'd say what you're keeping constant, and if you look at the formula, it's Q1 that is constant, both the numerator and the denominator, right? And Q1 is the quantity in 2018. So we say what we're keeping constant, and we say that the price of toiletry items has increased by 8.27% because that's what we worked out here. Okay, that's our change from 2010 to 2018. And go back to the chat. If everyone's okay with this. Right, so my question will tell us which one. Yes, exactly. The question will tell you. It won't allow you to just do whatever index you ask for. The question will tell you whether to use the last price or the price method. Okay, hand up. Yes.
Hey, sorry, I don't have a chat function.
No
I was
worries.
wondering, is the formulas given to us during the exam or not?
One of the formulas are given to you, so you don't need to memorize it.
So much.
No worries. Problem. All right. So to your question as well, and that I'm glad you asked the question. If you asked to work with the last price index, the formula is given. If you asked to work with the past price index, that formula is also given. There can be a case, and it is possible, like they could ask you, well, let me raise it before I answer the question so you have an idea what I'm talking about. Your question, they could sometimes ask you to work out the Las Perez quantity index. Now that formula is not given. So they give you the price index formulas, but they don't give you the quantity index formulas. But it's a matter of applying the principle to the price index to get it. Okay, so what do I mean by the principle? Okay, so let's look at the last price index. Okay, we look at the last price index. All last means is that whatever whatever quantity you're trying to vary. So if you're working at the price index, you have to vary the price. There's no ways you can determine how the price has changed if you keep the price the same in the top and the bottom. If you're working at the price index, you have to vary the price, but you don't vary the quantity. So which quantity do you keep constant? It's Q naught. And how do you know it's not? Because Las Perez is always the base year. The Las Perez is the base year is constant. Always. Posh is the current. So if you look at the price index, yes, we vary the price with a P1, P naught, but the quantity we keep the same is Q naught. Now, if we're asked to work at the last price quantity index, yes, we have to vary the price. We have to have Q1 in the top and we have to have Q naught in the bottom. But what price do we constant? And that is the base price because last price is always price. So it will be P naught and P naught here. And the sum is still the same. Did anyone get confused by this? Does that make sense to everyone? Principle is for last price, keep the base period constant. Do you want me to repeat that? Make sense? I'm more than happy to go over this again. Let me know. Yeah, I'll go over it again. Just one more time. All right. So the last price quantity. Sometimes they could ask you for last price quantity index. Right? Let me do the partial quantity index as well. Let me just do that. Maybe this might also reinforce it. So let's say they ask you for the partial quantity index. This formula is not given. Okay. But what we do is we look at the formula for the, use a different color now. Draw your attention to a different formula. Let's go black. Okay. Now we look at the partial price index. Now for the partial price index, we have to vary price. So we'd always have P1 and P naught. We'd have P1 in the numerator and P naught. But which quantity do we keep constant? And if you look at the formula, it's Q1 and Q1. So for Posh, it's always CH. It's always the current that we keep constant. Okay, for Posh, we always keep the current constant. So if we want to look at the quantity index for Posh, we have to vary quantity. That means we have to have Q1 on the top, Q naught on the bottom. but which price do you keep constant? And that is the current price. So that's P1 and P1. And get our summation size. Let me tab bar. So there's your formula. Anyone not sure about this, please let me know. I get silence. I'm just assuming everyone's following. They're all good. Remember, this is the time to actually ask the questions and make the most out of these collab sessions. All right. So if I can give you some advice on index numbers, the method that I've shown you how to do it, to basically create these 4 columns here that I'm going to put in black. I'm going to erase this. Okay, I'm going to open this thing up again. I want a clean board now. Okay. What I'm saying is these calculated columns, I prefer this method here because it's a bit neater and students get less confused. Okay, so the first thing you do is, this is what you would be given, right? You'll be given what I'm going to highlight in green. You'll be given this, right? You'll be given all of this up to here. That's what you're given. You may not be given the totals. So get the totals, right? You just add up all the rows. You add up this, this, and this, and you get the total here. And do the same thing for each column. I recommend you creating these 4 columns here. I'm showing you. All these 4 columns is your different combinations of price and quantity. So you can have P1 of Q0, right? You can have P0 of Q0, then you can have P1 of Q1, P0 of Q1. Those are the 4 pairs. So you would never have a column Q0 and Q1. You won't have Q and Q together. Neither would you have P0 and P together. You won't have P's together and Q's together. It's just the 4 combinations: P1, P1 Q0, P0 Q0, P1 Q1, and P0 Q1. Once we have these columns, right, and how you get these columns, it's exactly as the title tells you. It's telling you to say, take P1 and multiply by Q0. So everything in this column, P1, times everything in this column. That's how you get this column. And you follow the same principle for the other column. Once you have them, get the totals, right? And then once you have the totals, to use these formulas, it's very easy. You just look at what they're asking for. So for instance, for the last price, the numerator was P1 Q0. So you're looking for this column here, right? The denominator is P0 Q0. It's this total here, right? And the same principle applies for partial. Now, when I was asking the questions, I've noticed everyone that was posting in the chat, you seem to know which totals to look for, looking at the formula. And that makes it a bit easier for you. Because the other method, and I don't encourage this, but you're welcome to do it. So for instance, if you wanted, say we're doing the last Perez price index, right? So we have to work this out. And the formula is sum P1 Q0 all over sum P. So just the numerator, itself, okay, just the top part. You're going to look at every P1 times Q0. So that means you're going to have to do 210 cents for soap. We're going to go to soap, 2.1 times the quantity for soap, which is 37, plus then you're going to do deodorant, same principle, which is 15.95 times quantity for deodorant at Q0, which is 24, etc. You have to follow this formula for each of them and get the numerator. It is easy to make a mistake here, right, when you do it this way. But if you do it this way that I told you here, there is a less chance of you making that mistake. So it's up to you which method you want to follow. I encourage you to do the method I showed you. Create these extra columns, these 4 extra columns, work them out and get the totals. And then to do the final answer, it's pretty easy. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? You understand the method? It's a more organized, structured method with less chance of you making a mistake. Yes, the setting. Did you raise a question? Raise your hand, or just thumbs up? Thumbs up. All right. Okay, everyone good? All good? Any questions? I'll leave the floor open now for any questions, whether on this learning unit or on the ARC, etc. Silence. All right. Okay. Some of you have done the first ICE task. I'm very glad to see it. It's a nice way to kind of revise on the new one. So yeah, please go to that. And I hope you enjoyed it. It'll help with your revision. Okay, there's only 4 ICE tasks, so you should be able to complete what you call this ICE task 1 by now. Just also, if you're not sure about the pacer, you can always just check the calendar. If you click, let me just go here, I'll show it to you. And I'm assuming everyone can see my calendar, right? For both groups. Let me see calendar here. Calendar. On the Monday of every week, it'll tell you what you should cover. So for instance, we're on the week that starts on the 24th, that Monday. So it will tell you, if you look at it, learning LU2 to be covered. If you double click there, it will tell you exactly what you need to do. Students familiarize themselves with the formative index numbers, especially those not included in the formative hit, etc. And the next week, that Monday, the 3rd, if you click here, and if you click descriptive stats, it will tell you what you need to cover for this week. All right. Makes sense. All good. For today till next week, we should, yes, that is correct. You should be done with learning in 1 and learning in 2. And if you're stuck with anything, I will give you some problems to work through. I'll post the announcement. But if you're stuck with anything, you need principles or concepts or calculations you're not understanding, please drop me an email. You got to let me know what you're struggling with in order for me to help you. Okay, so I encourage feedback and revising your work. So there aren't any questions. We'll call it. I'd like to thank all of you for joining. I hope you understood the content that I've covered this evening. Question? No. All right, everyone. You're more than welcome. I hope you're enjoying these sessions. All right. Have a good one, everyone.